That morning, the phone started ringing at 8 o'clock. I already knew who it was, Daniel. His voice was frantic and rushed. All the vendors have canceled. The hotel says there are no more rooms, the catering company won't take our order, and the venue says their schedule is booked. What are we going to do? I let him finish, hearing the desperation in every word. Then I replied simply, "This is the consequence. You can't take someone's gift and then erase them from the picture." Daniel was silent, his breathing heavy on the other end of the line. For the first time, he wasn't the cheerful younger brother, but a man facing a disaster. Less than an hour later, Clara called. She tried to keep her voice calm, but her words trembled. "Dear, this has gone too far. Everyone is in a panic. Can you help us fix this? For Daniel and Maya." I kept my voice flat. "Did you ever think of me when the whole family decided to write me out? Or do you only think of me when everything falls apart?" On the other end, Clara was silent. I hung up. The messages started pouring in. Maya sent a long text, apologizing, pleading, saying she never wanted things to turn out this way. I read it, but didn't reply. I knew the truth. She had sat in on those discussions, had listened, and agreed when I was being excluded. Now, her regrets couldn't save anything. By noon, Ethan showed up at my office. He stormed in without an announcement, his face tense. "What do you want? How are Daniel and Maya supposed to handle this? This is the most important day of their lives." I looked up from my desk, my eyes unwavering. The most important day of their lives, but not important enough to save me a seat. "You want to know what I want? I want them to understand the consequences of disrespecting someone," he growled. "You're being petty. You're destroying this family." I stood up and looked him straight in the eye. "Number, you all are destroying it yourselves. I just removed the support beam." He took a step back, his eyes confused, for the first time realizing that his accusations no longer had any effect on me. That afternoon, I sat in my office looking out the window at the traffic below. The phone rang again. This time, it was one of the vendors. "We just wanted to confirm all contracts for the Daniel and Maya wedding are officially canceled, correct? They've been calling and begging, but our policy is to only take instructions from the parent company." I said clearly, "Correct. No exceptions." I hung up and leaned back in my chair. This time, the feeling wasn't anger, but the clarity of someone who had finally taken back control. That evening, Ethan tried a softer approach. He sat down in the chair across from me in the living room, his voice low. "I know you're angry, but don't you see? Everything is falling apart. Daniel is crying. Maya is devastated. Do you really want to see this?" I replied directly. "It's not what I want to see. It's what they forced me to see. When they decided I didn't exist, they chose this path." He was speechless. "I'm telling this because many of you may have been in a similar situation. Only when your presence is gone do people begin to realize its value. If you've ever experienced that, please share your story. It not only helps you, but it also helps others know they are not alone." For the next 2 days, chaos erupted. Daniel called constantly, begging. Maya's texts were filled with sobs. Clara even had mutual friends call on her behalf. But I didn't change my mind. The wedding guests started asking why their hotel rooms had been canceled. Some had already booked flights. The news spread quickly, leaving the family flustered, with no answers. On the 3rd day, Ethan walked into the room, his face exhausted. "You win, okay? The wedding is ruined. Now what?" I looked at him, my voice as cold as steel. "This isn't a game. It's a lesson, and you were the worst teacher of all." He didn't argue. He just sat there, his head in his hands. That evening, Daniel finally told the truth. He called me, his voice choked. "I was wrong. I know you were the one who took care of everything, but I stayed silent because I was afraid of going against Ethan and Mom. Now I've lost everything. I'm so sorry." I was quiet for a few seconds, then replied, "You only apologize when everything has fallen apart. But at least you're telling the truth. That's a start." For the first time, I heard real remorse in Daniel's voice. Not a plea to save the wedding, but a confession. After that call, I sat alone. This time, it wasn't anger or coldness, but a sense of emptiness. When people finally admit their faults, the pain is less sharp, but it leaves a deep hole of disappointment. The next day, Clara asked to meet. She sat in front of me, a forced smile on her face, her hands clasped tightly. Dear, every family has its ups and downs. Let's just move past this. The wedding can still be saved if you just retract the cancellation orders. I looked her straight in the eye. Number, moving past this means I accept being erased. And I will not. She was silent, her lips trembling, her eyes looking away first. I'm telling this part of the story so you understand. When a family unanimously decides to exclude you, they assume you have no choice but to be silent. But if you are strong enough to hold your ground, you will see that they need you more than you need them. And if you want to continue hearing real stories that expose the hidden power dynamics of everyday life, please follow this journey. Here, we are not afraid to name the truth. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the warm light casting shadows on the floor. The phone was silent, no more calls. Perhaps they had finally understood. I was no longer the person who could be placated with a few apologies. I had changed. The inevitable meeting took place on a Monday morning. I sent a formal meeting invitation to Ethan, Daniel, Maya, and Clara. The location wasn't a familiar restaurant or a family living room, but the main conference room at my company's headquarters. A long, dark wood table, leather chairs arranged neatly, and walls adorned with awards and certificates. I chose the seat at the head of the table. They arrived one by one. Ethan was the first, his expression rigid, his eyes avoiding mine. Daniel and Maya followed, their movements hesitant. Clara was the last, maintaining a polite smile, but her hands trembled slightly. They were used to seeing me at dinner, at family gatherings. Today, they were facing me in a different role, the one who held all the cards. I started directly, my voice even and cold. You wanted to exclude me from the wedding while still using the money I provided. I have shown you that your decision has consequences. No one answered. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock. I continued. Now, if Daniel and Maya still want to get married, there are two paths. 1, you figure it out yourselves. 2, I restore everything. But there will be conditions. Daniel looked up, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I didn't dare to go against Ethan and my mother, but I really want to get married. I looked him straight in the eye. His apology had a hint of sincerity, but it wasn't enough. I replied simply, an apology doesn't erase the facts. My conditions are as follows. I read out each point, clearly and distinctly. First, the entire cost of the wedding from now on will be reimbursed by the family for $75,000, double the original amount. Second, Ethan, Daniel, and Clara must write formal apologies, admitting that they wrongly excluded me. And third, during the ceremony, Daniel and Maya must publicly thank me and state the truth. Without me, this wedding would not have been possible. The room was completely silent. Ethan shot up from his chair and growled, You're turning a happy occasion into a forced spectacle. I looked at him, not blinking. Number, I'm turning a humiliation into a warning. Clara interjected, her voice sweet. Dear, every family has its misunderstandings. Why push things this far? I turned to her, my voice hard. A misunderstanding doesn't last for weeks. It doesn't come with text telling me not to be so sensitive. It doesn't involve my chair being moved from the table. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a deliberate exclusion. Maya lowered her head, her voice trembling. I agree. I'll do what you ask. I just want to marry Daniel, and I don't want to start this marriage with a lie. Daniel nodded, his expression exhausted. Ethan clenched his fists, his face flushed, but he said nothing more. Clara was silent. I knew, in that moment, that the scales had tipped. I was no longer the one sitting in the corner, being cut off. They were the ones who had to sit and listen to me read my conditions, each word like a knife, and they had no way out. I'm telling this part of the story because many of you may have been in my position, having to set conditions to force others to recognize your value. Don't be afraid. Respect sometimes doesn't come from soft negotiations, but from forcing others to face the consequences. If you've been through that, please share. It's an experience many people need to hear. After the meeting, I left the room, leaving them to sit together. As I walked down the hall, I saw a few employees glance at me with surprise. They had probably overheard what had happened. I didn't need to explain. The truth had laid itself bare. I was no longer the one being disrespected by the family. I was the one in control. 2 days later, the $75,000 was transferred to my company's account. I also received the letters of apology. Daniel's was long, filled with remorse. Maya had signed her name below his. Clara's was brief, avoiding the details. Ethan sent a cold single sheet of paper, only admitting he had handled things poorly. I read them all, filed them away, and didn't reply. The wedding was back on, but under my authority. All the vendors called me directly. No one dared to take instructions from Ethan anymore. The wedding day had a completely different atmosphere. The guest list was smaller, the decorations simpler but more elegant. Daniel and Maya gave their public thanks. Maya, her voice trembling, said clearly in front of everyone, "Without her, this day would not have been possible. We were wrong not to acknowledge her. And today, we are making it right." The guests applauded. I sat still, not smiling, just giving a slight nod. I didn't need the flowery words. I just needed the truth to be spoken. Ethan stood in the back, his face tense. I knew it bothered him to hear me mentioned publicly, but he didn't dare to intervene. Because this time, he had no voice to stop me. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't just a victory at a wedding. This was a verdict for the 15 years of silence I had endured. I want to pause to say this to you. Sometimes, justice isn't given to you by others. It comes when you force them to pay the price. If you agree, please stay with this journey. Every story here will show that silence is never a long-term solution. That evening, I came home and sat alone in my living room. Ethan walked in, placed flowers on the table, and said, his voice weary, "I was wrong, but can we just move on?" I looked up, my eyes cold. "You're not sorry for me. You're sorry because you're afraid of losing." He lowered his head and was silent. In the quiet room, I saw it for the first time with absolute clarity. This relationship was broken, and no bouquet of flowers could ever fix it. 3 weeks after the wedding, the house Ethan and I shared was silent. He spoke less, came home late, and sometimes tried to be gentle, but the distance between us could no longer be hidden. In the evenings, I would sit in the living room reading documents while he watched football in the bedroom. There was no conversation between us, just a heavy silence. One night, he brought home flowers and placed them in front of me. "I want to start over. We've been together for 15 years. Don't throw it all away over one mistake." I looked at him, my voice firm. "That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. You chose to erase me from your family and then use my money. That wasn't an accident." He was silent, his shoulders slumped. He knew there were no more excuses that could save him. The next day, I packed my things. My clothes, my papers, a few small keepsakes. It took me 2 hours. Everything fit into the trunk of my car. Ethan watched, his eyes red, but he said nothing. I closed the car door, started the engine, and didn't look back. I rented a new apartment. It wasn't large or fancy, but it was quiet. In the mornings, I would make my own coffee and open the window to let the breeze in. For the first time in years, I felt like everything in my home belonged to me. The news of the wedding drama spread through our industry. People whispered about the family story and how I had played my final card. Some called it cruel, but most called it fair. New partnership offers started pouring in. People wanted to work with a woman who refused to be trampled on. Daniel sent a long email. He said that after the wedding, he and Maya had talked a lot about what had happened. They realized they needed to be independent, no longer relying on the blind generosity of others. At the end of the letter, he wrote, "We know we hurt you, but we will live with this lesson for the rest of our lives." I read it and didn't reply. An apology couldn't erase the cracks, but at least it proved they no longer saw it as a small matter. Clara sent a Christmas card with a note. "I hope you can forgive us." I put the card in a drawer and didn't open it again. As for Ethan, he sent a settlement offer through his lawyer. In return for a much smaller share of the assets than I was entitled to, I signed it without negotiating. Not because I wanted to be easy on him, but because I no longer cared. In the months that followed, I focused on my work. New deals were more successful than I could have imagined. My name started appearing in industry articles. People no longer called me Ethan's wife. They called me by my own name. One evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was Maya. "I'm pregnant. I just wanted you to know. I hope my child grows up in a family that knows how to respect each other. We will never forget how you made us wake up." I read it and then set my phone down. I didn't reply, but for the first time, I didn't feel any bitterness. I felt light. I'm telling this part because many of you might be wondering, what is waiting for me after I leave? The truth is, something island. There is peace when you no longer live in disrespect. There is an emptiness, but in that emptiness, you begin to see your own value. If you have ever made the choice to leave, please share your story. Your story could be someone else's strength. A year later, I stood in front of my company's new building. The glass was gleaming, the sign engraved with my name. I remembered the night Ethan had told me not to make a big deal out of it. If I had stayed silent that day, I would probably still be sitting at the corner of a dinner table, waiting for someone else's approval. But I didn't. And that decision changed everything. I want to say one last thing to you. Never let anyone define your worth with their silence. If this journey has resonated with you, if you want to continue to hear stories about people who seemed powerless but were strong enough to flip the board, please stay with me. Here, we have many more stories to tell.